The Far Quest, The Chronicles of Cursoon, Book 1, by R. Jason Lynch. Chapter 31, A Singing in the Wood. Cursoon awoke to the loveliest noise he had ever heard. Climbing from the bed, he sleepily stumbled out onto the small balcony and looked down over the courtyard, but still, he could not find the source of the hauntingly beautiful sound. As he became more fully awake, he realized that the noise was the voice of a woman as she sang a wordless song. The wonderful tune drifted out from somewhere within the sunken forest and entered his chamber, like a honey-sweet breeze. Moreover, all the animals of Lakewood seemed to issue their calls in harmony with this wordless singing.
"What fair lady sings so beautifully?"
Cursoon asked himself with a curious smile. At that same moment, he noticed another noise. It was the sound of hammering, but it seemed to come from further away, and it was in discord with the lovely singing. Turning from the balcony, the bard quickly pulled on his clothes and hurried to find Tippleglee. He was sure the hammering noise was being produced by his grumpy old friend. Thus, after following this sound, he found the gnome on the terrace of stonework that hung out over the waterfalls. As Cursoon approached, Tippleglee was hard at work, but the bard was so distracted that he did not pay close attention to what the gnome was building.
"Who's that singing?"
the bard asked over the pounding of Tippleglee's hammer. The little man didn't hear Cursoon, but when he drew closer, Tippleglee noticed him for the first time.
"I'm glad to see you're still among the living,"
the old gnome almost shouted, and then wiped a bead of sweat off his long nose.
"I was beginning to think I might not have to go on this fool's journey after all,"
he added loudly as he pulled another wooden peg out of a bag slung over his shoulder.
"How long was I asleep?"
the bard asked with a frown.
"What?"
Tippleglee replied in a shout.
"Why are you yelling?"
Cursoon raised his voice with a furrowed brow and a puzzled grin.
"You'll have to speak up, lad,"
the old gnome bellowed.
"I said—"
The bard started to yell back, but then caught himself.
"Why are you having so much trouble hearing me?"
"If you're going to do naught but mumble, then I'll have to take out this beeswax."
Tippleglee grumbled as he pinched at something in his ears.
"Wait, why in Riven do you have beeswax in your ears?"
Cursoon asked with a perplexed look, but then interrupted the gnome when he noticed the singing again.
"Do you know who it is that's singing?"
"I've no time for talking,"
Tippleglee grumbled.
"I only want to hear the singing of my hammer and the playing of my saw."
Saying this, he started to put the wax back into his pointed ears.
"Hold on a second,"
the bard insisted.
"How long was I asleep?"
"You've been lazing about for nearly 3 days,"
Tippleglee replied. Cursoon's mouth dropped open with disbelief, but before the bard could say more, the grumpy little man stuffed the beeswax back into his ears and returned to his noisy labor.
3 days,
Cursoon muttered to himself.
"I slept right through King's Rest."
While still shaking his head, the bard realized his stomach was complaining of emptiness.
"No wonder! I haven't eaten for 3 days.
He grumbled, spun on his heels, and started back to the castle to look for something to eat. As he returned down the long train of arched bridges, the singing stopped, and a small tinge of wistfulness pricked his heart.
No matter who she is, I wish I could hear her song again,"
he mumbled as he pulled the postern door open. Coming into the courtyard, Cursoon glanced over at the sunken gate and the clear water that surrounded it.
"So, I've been in a dusty bed for 3 days,"
he remarked while shaking his head again. Taking off his colorful hat, the bard ran his hand through his tangled hair. After so many days without washing, he felt quite grimy.
"I should bathe before I eat,"
he suggested to himself. Seeing the sense in this, Cure soon turned and strolled to where the cobblestone lane went down into the lake. After glancing around to be sure he was alone, he undressed and waded out until he was chest-deep in the water. The lake was cool, and as he washed himself, he quickly began to feel clean and refreshed. When the bard started to come out of the water, the wordless singing resumed, and he was glad to hear it. With a bright smile, he gazed out at the flooded forest beyond the outer curtain wall. As before, he could not determine where the song was coming from because of how it echoed across the lake.
Truly, I do wonder. What lady sings so beautifully in such a deserted place as this?
He muttered to himself yet again.
I can answer that question easily enough.
A small voice abruptly replied from somewhere nearby. With sudden shock, Cure soon quickly dropped back down into the water to hide his nakedness. Glancing around, he growled,
Who's there? Show yourself!
Without any sign of hesitation, a small boy came to stand upon the shore between the bard and his clothes. Noticing the movement on the edge of his vision, Cure soon turned with a note of fear upon his bearded face. But when he saw the child, this quickly melted away only to be replaced with confusion.
Well, hello there.
The bard responded with a relieved expression.
Where'd you come from, and how'd you get here?
As he spoke to the boy, Cure soon glanced about for the child's parents. He could not be more than 3 years old. Therefore, he seemed far too young to be wandering around the forested lake all by himself.
Hello.
The little boy replied, and then answered the 2 questions without hesitation.
I came from Pines Island, and I rode here on Dapple's back.
The boy's eyes were large and bright green. His flaxen hair lay in wavy locks and hung down long enough to completely cover his ears. His tiny feet were bare, and he wore a loose tunic without a belt. This pale green shirt hung midway to his thighs, and under it he wore a pair of dark green trousers that came down just past his knees. As he spoke in a cheerful tone, his eyes suddenly shifted from glowing green to a bright yellow. At the same time, he flashed a happy smile. The sudden change in his eyes chased everything else out of Cure soon's mind. The bard's face took on an expression of shocked amazement, and he stammered out his next sentence while trying to form a question that would not be taken as impolite.
What? What are you?